The Life Talk Show is about testimonies where you can listen to be inspired, encouraged, uplifted, and entertained. It's the life. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Cotton, and I'm the host for the Life Talk Show. And with me, as always, I do have a guest to speak about their testimony. And for those that are new to the Facebook or to YouTube, I thank you so much. And for those that have been rocking with me, that have been following me, liking, sharing, commenting on Facebook or on YouTube, I want to say thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And you all know what this show is about. It's about testimonies based on Revelation 12:11. We overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimonies. And it's so important to be able to share our story, because the more that you share, the more freer you become, the more transparent you're able to be. And really, it's about giving God the glory of, our journey, of our, trials and tribulations, the things that we've been through, that we're able to share with one another, to sharpen one another. And so without further ado, my guest, Cornelius Kirk, is God-fearing man, a father of 4. He has 1 grandson, a community advocate and mentor for the youth, workshops on life skills. He's a sales director for a startup company, and he also co-hosts on the Bro Code Show, and also hosts on You Matter Unscripted, team lead with nonprofit for Young Men for Christ, and cheers. So that's what he has for his bio. Short, sweet, to the point. So Cornelius, tell us a little bit about you. Give us some background information as far as your before Christ, or when you came to the point of knowing God, as knowing Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And at first, when I met you, because you've been on the Life Talk Show before, back in 2019, when I was at Fitchburg Radio Network, and we did this. That was my first time ever doing a show virtually. And so I had to figure out, how to do it, what to do, because I didn't know anything about StreamYard at the time. It would have been nice to know that, but we managed and we made it through. And so now you're back again for the second time. And before, you were known as Mr. Whatever It Takes, whatever it takes. And I've noticed on social media how you transition to You Matter. So we're going to touch base on that. But first, tell us about, who you are.
Yeah. And first of all, Ashley, thank you. I feel very privileged, first of all, to be here for the second time. And it's funny because you talked about the first time going virtual. And I remember being in my hometown. I was visiting my mom in Kalamazoo, and there was no Wi-Fi. So I'm driving around that morning before I got to jump on with you. I had to actually pull up on a hotel and ask them if I could use their Wi-Fi and come on the show. This time was a little bit easier because I'm in my office. But you know what? I'm thankful to be here. My relationship with Christ started young, and I'm thankful. I lived with my grandmother, moved in with her when I was in the 8th grade, and she's everything God. So you're not going to be in her space and not know who God was. And at the time, it didn't dawn on me how important it was. I was actually like, Grandma, can you stop? But she was relentless about it, and it stuck with me. And so I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. So I know most people have to go to church with their grandmother, with their grandparents, or someone who God raised up in the bloodline to really pass the baton of knowing who, Christ is, the relationship. And, it may have started off as religion, but eventually you find your own way of having your own relationship with the Father. So talk about that, how you found your own way. A seed was planted, or that seed was watered by your grandmother, but eventually God will bring the increase for you to have your own relationship.
Yeah. Great point. I'm really big. I never really tell people how to have a spiritual relationship with God. I think proximity or exposure to what God is, and then allowing people to, because the relationship is different for each one of us.
Yes.
Right. So it's been a journey, right? I'm still asking questions about what that's supposed to look like with God every day as a 47-year-old man. It never stops.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just thankful that I, at a younger age, had enough exposure to know God. And, as Proverbs 22 says, if you've shown it, you'll come back. So many of us have departed, done all of our searching, and then it doesn't go away, though. It's always inside of us. So I'm thankful for that early exposure.
Okay, so let's talk about how you had to pivot from Mr. Whatever It Takes, and then that's what you were pushing, and now the pandemic happens in 2020 of March, and now you transition to You Matter. So how did all of that come about? How were you able to pivot?
Yeah, so the pivot really was about community. All right. So Mr. Whatever It Takes was something that Cornelius needed. I needed that to push through some of the adversities that I was going through in my personal life. So I created that. And that was something that I spoke to students on, about having a mindset of pushing past your obstacles. Right. But I was in a classroom in a high school, and a young man told me, he said, Mr. Kirk, I don't matter. And I simply said back to him, I said, man, you do matter. And the way he looked at me was like it was the first time he'd ever heard those words. And the whole classroom chimed in and said the same thing. No, we don't feel like we matter. And that day I started to use that mantra. And it's been, I think, a year and a half. And it really matters to people. I think we're surprised. We don't really understand how many people are walking around feeling like they don't have a voice, that their story doesn't matter, or that their life doesn't matter. And I think that's where I kind of put my anchor down for the work that I want to do for God.
Mm-hmm. And so, let's go through the process. Like, I'm all about details. So I'm like, let's just go through the process like deeper, because you're doing one thing, and that was to set up through that young man to say that you matter. But what was going on in your own personal life during the pandemic? Like, did you take a time where you were like, what am I going to do? Like, how did you keep moving? How did you become still consistent?
Ooh, you're taking me back to some dark times. Listen,
we gonna talk about it now. We gonna find out.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the tea. Listen, I was working corporately before that, and I quit and jumped out into my own thing, and I was fine. I was really starting to kind of climb, right? And the pandemic, because most of my work was in schools. Well, the pandemic hit, and it shut me down. So there was so many lessons in that. Was, the harvest, do you have enough set aside so that if the storm comes, that no matter what happens, you're okay, right? And so for me, the pandemic, what it did was it taught me a lot about life and how I'm supposed to take care or be a good steward of what God given me. Because most of us have enough. We just sometimes use it the wrong way. And so during the pandemic, I did whatever I had to do, right? I still had speaking engagements virtually and got paid that way. I work with a nonprofit. I got paid that way. So the money was okay. It wasn't what I was used to, but it was a lesson that for me, really, Ashley, I'm not set. If something tomorrow comes that tells me, if God says, you know what, you matter is not the message, I need you to talk about this, I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of times we attach it to our identity so deeply that if it's ripped away by God, we feel like we can't do the next thing. And it's just not true.
Oh, that's very good, Cornelius, that our identity, we tie it up with our occupation of what we're doing. That's who my identity is. But the identity is in God, because however God wants to move and whatever he wants to do, you have to be pliable to that. You have to be willing to shift and move too.
Yeah. I think, exactly. I think that many of us, and I remember in the Bible, talk about Jacob wrestling with God. I think we wrestle with God because we want what we want. But there's times where God comes in and says, no, that's not for you. And we have to be able to be obedient and surrender to what God wants in that way, right? And here's the thing. Every time I've done that, first of all, when I fought God and God let me go into that area, because he does that, if we have that free will, the wheels have fall off, right? Right. Every time I've surrendered and said, God, okay, whatever you want, it's always been bigger than what I thought I was deserving. And I don't know why we don't get that. It's always bigger and better if we do it God's way.
And so with You Matter, what is, because you said that Mr. Whatever Takes was regarding you, about you, and you touched on there were some things that you had to focus on, some things that you had to really hone in on as far as you were concerned. And so what was those things that you had to say, you know what, I got to change from the inside out. I have to be transformed from the inside out. Because I feel like since you worked on you, like you, God, and the Holy Spirit, y'all were, making some moves, some changes within you. So now it goes from being inward to outward, where you're able to say you matter. Now you're pretty much pointing the finger at the next person to say, here's a hand, let me help you up.
Yeah. So I'm really big on the spiritual village, right? I can't succeed alone. People always say they were self-made and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, you're not. God made you. So if at the beginning of our journey in life, if we really find out, I think the scripture says that we're supposed to know who we are first in God. And that's number one, right? Once I understand that and own that premise, everything else is it's still going to be dark times, but I've done that. And it's a process. I'm still doing it every day, learning who I am every day. But once I'm figure out that, then I can go out and do the you matter thing and do it the right way. I was struggling with my ego, right? I was struggling with, I had the 6-figure job. I had the title. I was starting to feel myself. And I realized it. And I was a little depressed because it was about me.
Mm-hmm.
That matter is not about me. It's about other people. It's about the village mindset and the community of people that I believe that's what we're sitting here for. I don't believe, Ashley, that we're sitting here I think I don't know if God really cares about how much money we make or what our title is or how big our house is. I think it's all about love and how we treat our fellow man and woman. That's really what I believe.
Yeah.
Especially those that don't have. Right?
Yes, exactly. Those that don't have. And so when you talk about the ego, because I heard a particular guy that I know, and he's like, he wants his ego to be massaged, like as a man, like as a woman, I want my ego to be massaged. And I'm like, I ain't doing it. Like, I'm not going to speak down to you. I will speak life to you, and I will lift you up and pray and all of that. But all that, like, I feel like when you trying to massage a man's ego, like you sweating him, like, oh, you so this and you so that, and you, really trying to pump his head up to be something more than what he is. And there's a thin line with that when you building, your guy up and you talk. But what do you think about that? Like, as a man perspective, where you talked about your ego, because obviously that was hurting you.
Yeah.
And God had to humble you. So what do you think about that whole thing?
I'm 100% in agreement with you. If as a man, I can only speak from a man's perspective, right, and my personal perspective. You don't need to put me on a pedestal. You don't need to tell me how great I am. I really believe it's for me to do first with God, right? And if I understand that day one, there's nothing outside of me that can increase my value, my spiritual value, right? So I don't need to be pumped up by a woman or another man or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. I do get around friends and we pump each other up, but in a healthy way, right?
Right.
But it's not from an egotistical. I don't care what. That's a nice car, but it can be taken away. And so, no, I don't believe, especially when you talk about relationships between men and women, that's how that should look. Right. No. Now you can say I'm proud of you, baby, or whatever y'all call each other. You can say I'm proud of you, or I'm thankful that you're here. But to say you the man and you don't, no, it's dangerous.
Yeah, no, it is, because like, listen, if that's what you need, then you need the yeah.
And if they need that, they're gonna always need that.
Exactly, they're gonna always be.
And the moment that you stop doing it, they're gonna look for somebody else to do it, even within your relationship.
Yeah, well, we're not together, like we're not, but I just in conversation, this is what this individual said. And so when you brought that up, I was like, yeah, do all men think that way? Because it's good that, you said that your ego, like the things that you were having to work out with and having to deal with on the inside of you, what created the ego? Was it your position at work? Was it the cars, the money, what was that?
I think it would be a little bit of all of it, right? I think if we're not careful, when you cheer on people, some people get the big head, right? And they don't realize it sometimes. And so I'm very careful of that. I mean, I don't mind compliments. That's cool, but I don't need them. Like, I think that's cool, but we have to be careful because our ego is always fighting with our spirit, right? And so if we're not in our spirit, we're in our ego, and our ego it'll mess you up. And you see it every day with people. And I'm very clear. I said, okay, that person is speaking from their ego and not their spirit. I'm speaking from my spirit. I'm living from my spirit. And it's not a perfect science. I fail every day, but I'm in tune with it. I check myself at the end of every night. I check myself. Yo, were you walking in your spirit today? Or did you let your ego be the GPS, right? No.
Yeah. That's good, Cornelius. So let's talk more about You Matter. So it's your nonprofit, is that right?
It's not a true nonprofit. It's really just my personal business.
Okay.
I know you know nonprofit. Nonprofit takes a lot of work. There's a lot of work behind that. I don't know if you're ready for that. I ain't ready for that smoke yet. But I do partner with nonprofits.
Okay.
I know my role, right? I know my strengths and my weaknesses. My strength is not a nonprofit. It may be one day if God tells me to do it, I'll do it. But right now, I'm a community partner with a lot of nonprofits. I go in and kind of be a part of their message. I like that better.
Oh, okay. And so what nonprofits have you partnered with as far as, your matching coinciding with their message?
Absolutely. So my biggest one, and that's the Bro Code show, but it's called Young Men for Christ. I've been doing that since we talked last time. And I'm a team lead with that. We take young men from 7 to 17 and we expose them. Most of them are Black or brown young men. We expose them to environments that they wouldn't usually see. Horseback riding or going to play golf, coding. We have a basketball program. We have a football program, right? We have a farming program. We do all these programs. We have a barbershop rap session where we bring them in and we bring in law enforcement. We bring in political people and we just talk. And so,
that's good. That is awesome.
It's so strong to see. What we're trying to do is, I understand, for instance, with the police and what's going on in our country, it's a difficult conversation for an adult. Yeah. Well, these young men are having those same feelings, but we're trying to let them see that it's not every officer. You can still have a healthy relationship with the police and build that from a young age. Yeah,
because you're in North Carolina, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you're in North Carolina. So with the young brown and Black boys that you have, because I'm sure it's only based in North Carolina, but would you all partner with other, organizations outside of North Carolina, perhaps travel with it?
Yeah. So here's the thing that happened with the pandemic for us. We were going into schools too. That was every week. And so we had to shut that down, but we created a virtual mentoring group. So we had that now. So we're mentoring young men one-on-one across the country right now. No, we don't have any ceiling on what we can do. Like that model for that barbershop, in my opinion, should be in every city because it's duplicatable. It can be done anywhere. If you can get the people, the law enforcement to want to come in and the people that want to come in and have a healthy conversation, it really brings a lot of healing, especially right now.
Especially right now. And have you, because this is very interesting to me, in that barbershop where you all are talking, has there been any type of explanation or an incident where, let's say that there has been tensions within the community with those officers that have experienced it with the public? And what was that conversation like?
Yeah, we've had some heated conversations, respectfully. That's one of the tickets to get you in the door is you can speak your mind, but you have to speak from a respectful standpoint and listen. And so we've had we went right in on everything that's happening, and people in the crowd are listening, and this is great because we've never been police officers, so I know what we see, but I need to hear their perspective of why this stuff is happening. And a lot of the answers have really brought some closure to how people feel about what's going on in our country.
And what was some of those things that they exposed, how they feel on their end?
So I think the biggest thing was, please don't assign a universal value from one officer's mistake. So if an officer in Minnesota made a mistake, if you're in Texas, I'm not that officer. That officer had maybe needed better training. Maybe, I don't know what their situation is, but deal with that one-on-one, like every other profession. If you come across a bad teacher, every teacher's not bad. It might just be that one educator, right? And so, but it's hard because people are dying. So it's a high level of trauma that comes from it.
Right. And they're not just dying in one state, in one place. They're here, there, all over.
Yeah. So one of their things, and a lot of these officers, I think there's 9 chiefs. They're friends of mine, right? They're not just these people come in and they come in their regular clothes. They're human, and we have those conversations, and they really want to have change. They are not allowing bad officers to stay in the department. These people are let go in most of these places. We just don't hear those stories.
See, and that's the part, and that's the part right there. The media, like you highlight so many bad things and so many negative things that people are so drawn, so desensitized with all the bad and negative, and then you begin to carry on that mindset where, oh, every police officer is bad, everybody is getting away, and nothing is being justified or held accountable. But then you hear police officers that are stepping up to the plate to say, listen, wrong is wrong and right is right, and we're drawing the line in that. So then why not have that highlighted? Why not? Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. But when you talk about the media is a sales game, and people are drawn to negativity. So you're going to get more of a rise out of people if you talk about the negative end of it versus, oh my gosh, they really are making a change. It is happening. And so, shout out, there are some media outlets that are doing it the right way and showing the good, but most are not. And you know what? You're right. If you see it over and over, it will become your perspective, and you won't be able to see the good because you're so used to the bad.
Yeah, and that's with everything. You have to change your perspective. It starts in your mind, right? Be renewed, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that's really good, Cornelius. So what else are you doing? Like, what else is to come, for the future, if or, you continually moving forward in what God has called you to do?
Let me talk about this for a minute, because this is important. Sometimes we set these earthly goals, right? I got my journal right here next to me, and I be writing in there all this stuff. But I'm gonna be honest with you. Everything that I'm doing has come when I haven't made a plan. I've just went out every day and been the best me. And so, for instance, the startup that I'm working with, right? I didn't go looking for it. She reached out to me on social media and says, I want you to come work for my company. I've never met this lady. She said, I've been watching you. The last 2 positions that I've had like that were 2 people who, one gentleman watched me, he said, for 2 years. He said, I've been watching you for 2 years, bro. I never said anything because I want the right people in my company. I want you to come work for me. That was my interview, 15 minutes over coffee. So I always tell people, you're on a spiritual interview every day, and people are really watching and never saying anything.
Yeah.
Right? And so the startup reached out, and these are great. These are great people. I promised myself that I would not put myself in any more toxic work environments. I just wasn't going to do it. And I'm blessed. I believe it's exactly where I was supposed to. That area is anointed. That's where I was supposed to be.
Absolutely. And when you seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, it will be added to you, that you don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to beg for it, that it's going to come to you as you're moving forward in the things that God has called you, because you're in order and you're in alignment with him. It's going to be added to you at the appointed time. So that's probably the biggest enemy, is the time. Like, we think it's supposed to happen right here, right now, when I want it, but really God is very strategic, and he's very intentional with how he moves, not Absolutely. The way you're supposed to be moving. So that's Absolutely. Really good.
Absolutely. Let me speak to that for a second too. I think that we do have time limits because a lot of us, we want to flex on people in the world, right? It's so true. And so we need God to hurry up and bring this blessing so we can go show that, we're blessed, instead of just staying the course. You ask God, what do you want from me? And my word is until, right? I'm going to do this until. There's no time on it, right? There's no time.
Wow. That's a mind shift. I'm going to do this until.
Yeah, there's no time. I think sometimes we lose. We fail because we put time on it. It didn't come fast enough, so we quit. Find out what it really is that your purpose is in God, and become that. I've literally become You Matter. Like, that's who I am. That's my identity. So I don't have to fake it because it's who I am. I don't have to remember who I am. It's who I am. I'm fit, right? I'm healthy. I don't have to worry about going to a gym because it's part of who I am. I don't have to worry about going to church because it's part of who I am, versus always having to, be here or there. It's foundational.
So Cornelius, you mentioned something that, we have our journals and we journal things and we write the plan. So talk about the breakdown between writing the vision down and making it plain versus, every day you just wake up and say, okay, Lord, have your way. Holy Spirit, lead me, or whatever you say, when you start your day. Talk about that.
Yep. So when I say I don't write it down, I do write down. I do have plans. I just don't have, it doesn't have to be a certain amount of money. It's where I'm supposed to be versus what the result's going to look like. Because I don't know what the result's going to look like, right? So for instance, if I want a new car, and we're supposed to be very clear about it, but I just don't believe that God cares about that. So I put all my stuff on paper of what I believe it should look like, and I leave it like that. And I let God bring in the goal and the plan, and I leave it like that. And it's always worked out for me. It just has.
Yeah, because I'm starting to do that more. Like I have my journal where I do my Thanksgiving. Like I thank him for all the things that I've been asking for, that I've seen come into fruition. And then I have like the things that I desire, like, I desire this, I need this, and desire, and then I just leave it there and let God do whatever God is going to do to bring it all together.
Yeah, I used to write down. I would write down, I want a BMW or Mercedes. I'm okay with a Camry. Right? So I'm gonna go from A to B no matter what I'm in. And so I'm not so rigid in what I think that I need. And most of this stuff is above what it's not something I actually need. It's a want. So I'm really focusing more on my needs nowadays, so that I can, if it is, a lot of times us putting a goal out for what I want takes away from my purpose, because I'm putting the resources that I have into me instead of other people. And I just don't want to do that. It doesn't fulfill me.
Absolutely. So right now, is there anything that you want to say, anything that God is placing on your heart to speak to the audience, a little, maybe some encouragement, a little tip here, whatever?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I really believe that whoever's listening, it might not be for you. It might be for somebody else. You can see on my shirt is about surrender. Like, okay, God, I got you. I hear you. I'm yours. Right. But God didn't put us here to live low, to think low, to worry about things. God put us here to make a difference, an impact. And it's not about how big your house is, what degree you have, how much money you have in the bank. It's really about spiritual connection first, and then the connection to people, and then loving the world. It really is. And when you realize that, it will change your life in that moment. It won't take a year. It'll happen in that moment. When you set your heart in the right place, right? You stop worrying about all this earthly stuff, because at the end, I want people to understand we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. And if you don't first say we're spiritual beings having a human experience, it's life changing. So don't forget, we have one life, and God is in all of us. So you may be going through something, but God is with you. It's good. You all good. It's all good.
That's good. That's rich. Thank you. So I'm going to hit you with the fire rapid questions. Yeah. So the first question is, what is your favorite verse in the Bible?
Matthew 6:33, 34, 35, and you've already quoted it. I love the one at the end where it says, seek ye first, but the second one says that tomorrow will worry about itself. Right. Yes. And so I'm really working on being spiritually present for today. Today only. I'm not worried about yesterday. It's gone. I can't touch it. I'm not worried about tomorrow. I'm going to be present today spiritually.
Number 2, how do you get into the presence of the Lord?
Environment, right? And that presence always there. God's with us everywhere we go.
Yes.
I don't have to have a special room or anything like that. I stop where I am. I breathe. I pray, and I call him. And he's there all the time. It never fails.
Number 3, what do you think heaven will be like?
It's a great question. I think it'll be peaceful. I think it'll be peaceful. I really do.
Number 4, who would you like to meet in heaven? It could be from the New Testament or Old Testament.
It's got to be Paul, because Paul has to have some stories. Paul was a killer first, and then he came onto the light side. I want to hear those stories.
You know what? There's this guy, I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of him, but Jesse Duplantis. He's you never heard of him? He's like this white Cajun man from Louisiana, and his testimony is so wild. But he does have a testimony about going to heaven and a visitation and everything. And he said that you have to see it. Like, I watched it the other night, and it was just like, wow, like it just goes beyond anything that you can ever think of what heaven is like. So one of the things that he did mention that he said is that, you know, he's like a billow of smoke, like just this huge, powerful, you know, where he was standing, and he was escorted by an angel. But he said that he met Paul, he met Jonah, he saw King David like kind of in the distance, and he said that he said he was just asking questions. So he said he asked Paul, like, were you married? Did you have kids or whatever? And Paul said, what does it matter? That part of my life, he said it doesn't matter, because it was about the gospel. It was about Christ. That's what I wanted to preach. That doesn't matter. He also said, and that's why you don't know anything about Jesus from the time that he was 12, like he left his parents and he went to the temple. You don't know anything about him from that time all the way up until, he said, because it doesn't matter. The things that are written down is what matters, which was about the kingdom. And then he said he met Jonah, right? And Jesse Duplantis, he's very funny, like very comedic, very like, you know, wow. But he said that he met Jonah, and he noticed their robes, because they're like, you know, with jewels and crowns, and their robe is like very royal and everything. And Jonah had on a plain robe. Like he said, it wasn't adorned. It was just a plain robe. And so he asked Jonah, like, man, what was it like being in that whale? Like, what was it like being in the belly of the fish or the whale and everything? And he said, Jonah just looked at him and said, it was out of disobedience. It was out of disobedience. And so he was like, man, I should have obeyed. And he said, and you make sure when you go back, like down back to earth or whatever, because the spirit was up there, when you go back to earth, just preach the gospel. Preach the gospel and save souls. Preach the gospel and save souls. That was their whole thing. That was about their Father's business. It wasn't like, hey, you know, when you meet them or when you get a chance to see them, of course, you'll talk to them and have a conversation, but it always pointed back to the kingdom, being about the Father's business. And he said that when he was about to depart from heaven, because it was time for him to go, you know, they each gave him, like, you know, preach the gospel, just keep going, win souls for him, go hard. Like, you know, they was like doing this or like cheering him on. And he said that Jonah leaned in and said, obey. Like, whatever you do, just obey, you know. And I think that that's very cool when people do get those kind of revelations, because it makes it real that people have actually experienced that, and it makes it real, and they come back with the message of God and everything. And so, yeah, so I have one more question. Well, actually two more, so I'm not going to touch base on that. But I just like to ask these questions, like, you know, what do you think heaven is like? Who do you want to meet in heaven? And so, yeah. Number 5, given the opportunity, what would you like to say to God face to face in a quiet, intimate setting if you have that chance?
Great question. I think it would be simple. I just want to say thank you. You know, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think life's an opportunity. Thank you for giving me a second and third and 10th and 100th chance when I wasn't. You know what I mean? Just gratitude. Just gratitude. Because I know it, without it, I have nothing. So thank you.
Yeah. And last question. This is the bonus question. And I didn't ask you this last time because when we had our winter storm and, you know, our lights was out and water was out and we were all going through, the Holy Spirit gave me this question to ask, the bonus question. And so with everything that you've endured, with everything that you've gone through, knowing, you know, your beginning, because you've already walked that out, and where you are now, but not knowing what lies ahead of you for the future, would you still say that it's worth having a relationship with him? Because we know that people do walk away. People get tired. People get fed up. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought it would be. And, tragedy has happened. I lost everything and I'm upset and I'm bitter because it wasn't what I wanted, right? And so they depart. But is it worth it, not knowing what lies ahead of you? Because anything can happen at any given time, at any day. And knowing the road that you travel to get you where you are right now, is it worth being in a relationship with him and knowing him and doing his will?
It is. I've done years of serving meat, and I never felt fulfilled. I was never meaningful. It was temporary, right? And so God never promised that we would be without adversity. He just promised, I'm not going to leave you. And so if it's about me, I will walk away. That's why it's so important to be about the spiritual village. Because when it's about other people, it's much harder to quit on people that you care about. And so I've really tried to really put in my life a lot of people that I care about. And I'm doing it not just for me, but for them and for God. And when you have that equation, it's much easier to say, yeah, I got to get up and get at it because I got people counting on me spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, any final thoughts before we end our broadcast?
Yes. I guess let me ask you a question.
Oh, you want to ask me a question? Well, wait a minute. That ain't part of the, that's not part of the rules now. You can't ask the host no questions. No, I'm joking. I'm playing. You can ask me whatever.
It takes a lot. It's been a couple of years you've been doing it. It takes a lot of work behind the scenes to do what you're doing, whether it's the graphics, the emails, because I do it all. I know it's not easy. So what's your level of self-care, or who pours into you so that Ashley keeps going other than God? So I know you tap into God, right?
Yes. With prayer. Yes.
God, how do you self-care so that
my sisters in Christ? A lot of them are from the life group that I attended when I was going to One Community Church. And so those relationships have carried over outside of the building. And so we have a group text chain message, and we just check in with one another and we just say, hey, how are you? And we're always there to pray with one another. We have our brunch some days where we go out to eat and dinner and stuff, and just to check in. So I will say, my sisters, I will say my best friend Ayana, who I can call and talk to or text, or things that you can actually go to people with who you can trust and be transparent and be very open without judgment, and one of the things that I really care about, and that is always at the forefront, is my witness, whether I'm behind closed doors or whether I'm in front in the limelight, whatever. My witness has to be even, Steven. It has to be consistent. I can't be out here acting wild and doing whatever. And also my spiritual mother, Miss Cynthia, I can always call her and we will pray together. We will come together in agreement. And I think that you really need a strong spiritual bond with people who have the same mindset as you.
Absolutely.
Who, can understand what you're going through. And you're right. It takes a lot of work. I'm already booking for the month of July. I'm staying ahead of this, and I can't afford to be lackadaisical about it, because I feel like the moment that I just become blasé, that things are just going to start to crumble and fall apart. So I have to be about my Father's business, and I want to do this with the spirit of excellence. So my self-care will be on, sometimes I just veg out. Like sometimes I just be with my son. Like we go hiking. Oh, being outdoors in nature, I love it. So being like hiking, being amongst nature, looking at, different animals and stuff. That's my happy place. That brings me serenity, and I'm able to, fellowship with the Father, like looking at his flowers, looking at his creation, being in tune with it and saying, wow, God, you created this, and just looking at the detail of his canvas of earth. And that just brings me solitude. That just brings me back to ground zero before I do the hustling and bustling and doing what I have to do. And so that's a great question. So thank you. Thank you very much for asking about that, because it does take a lot. And I know that I'm very particular about my stuff. And I know I could be like, and I mean well, but it's not about me. It's about how I represent him in this earth, how the show represents him.
The spirit of excellence. You said it perfectly.
Yes,
absolutely. I totally get it. Love it. I just came back from the mountains too, by the way, for 3 days, unplugged, right? New man when I came back. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Did you come across any wildlife?
Just turkeys. And we were, I'm talking deep in the mountains, like hiking, no cell phones, no service, but just turkeys. I didn't see anything else. I'm glad I seen bears. It was,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cornelius, for coming on and just, speaking about, where you are, what you're doing, your transitions and everything. I greatly appreciate it. To you all that are watching, I thank you for sharing this, liking this, subscribing to the YouTube channel. Also, I do want to make an announcement, because I'm going to be pushing this all month long for June and July, that it is the Life 14-6, which is my nonprofit organization, where it's Ashley's Heart Community Outreach. I am stepping out into the community for the first time with my fundraising event for going back to school. Kids are going to be going back to school in August. And so July 31st is the actual event. It starts at 10 a.m. and it's going to be located here at the office. And I have a flyer and all that good stuff. And so I really want you all to come, because it's going to be a fun family event. And, everyone could just come out there and get a book bag for your daughter, for your son. I have someone that's going to be giving out, haircuts. And so they're going to be, hooking it up. Also, there's going to be something for the parents and something for our little girls too, to encourage every kid to get ready to start off a great new school year with everything that has happened from 2020 into 2021, that we're going to kick off our going back to school year. And it's going to be a great, phenomenal year for all of our children. So I thank you so much. Just thank you. And I will see you guys this Saturday with a new guest to speak about testimonies. God bless you all. Take care.